happening in the country. In 1977, Sri Lanka becomes liberalized. In other words, a new government comes in which is capitalist and has sort of neoliberal ideas, and the tourist industry is its most kind of important industry. I mean, along with some others, but this is the industry that will really shape architecture. So until then, tourism is internal. It's to circuit bungalows and rest houses. You know, foreign tourists go to the sort of colonial hotels. But once it becomes liberalized from 1970 onwards, architects have this new program, the tourist hotel, which they begin to design for. And this hotel is based on domestic architecture. In other words, the domestic house gets expanded upon, the number of rooms multiply, and it becomes the model for the hotel. Now this is a remarkable little building which shows this transformation of the house. The original house is actually an existing heritage building, this piece. And what Baba does is he builds a series of L-shaped additions. So, L. And I can trace those L shapes right through the plane. And by creating these sort of L-shaped additions, he naturally creates courtyards. So a series of these kind of L and C-shaped planes, articulating courtyards, facing the ocean, and a sort of rationale for producing an expanded domestic architecture for a boutique hotel. And this is a sensitive sort of reworking of an existing heritage building. But as he is pressed to design hotels from scratch, tabula rasa opportunities to build hotels, Baba begins to formalize the vernacular. He begins to develop the roof as the form that he will always repeat in a particular way. He extends them to 200 and 300 group hotels. These buildings in Bali become this kind of signatory examples that Southeast Asian architects will follow. And what this does is something that is actually quite serious. At this time, Sri Lanka's villages are low-rise, small configurations along the southern coast. And there are no public buildings other than the temples and the temple structures. The tourist hotel brings a 3-story structure into a village environment as a gated community and urbanizes the village through its public presence. It's public, but it's not accessible to villagers other than as labor. So what you're doing is you're producing a building that looks public, that is at the scale of a public building. You're creating an urban, metropolitan kind of presence in a location. But it is completely detached, it's completely segregated from the village outside. And by the spread of these hotels, continuing in this manner along the southern coast, Sri Lanka urbanizes its coastline. And at the same time, impoverishes its villages. So when we introduce hotels, this is something we need to think about. Because what happens when you introduce something that is a private venture at the scale of a public building? And what happens when that private venture takes the vocabulary of everyday architecture, but is producing it for external consumption? So these are the questions, the political questions underlying the creation of the hotel industry. And we know that it spreads to all architecture in the region. We know that it creates the tropical Asian house for expatriate and elite residences. We know it produces the resort tourism that we see all over Asia. And that these resorts, particularly in Bali, reproduce the village. In other words, you go into a Balinese resort and you feel like you're in the Balinese village. But these are not Balinese villages. So what you're doing is you're playing with the imagery of the vernacular. What you're taking away is democratic intent. And this is troubling about the appropriation of the vernacular. And why this kind of aesthetic takes because of a series of annual publications. And they all typically have the word tropical, including the book that was written by me and published by Patrick Hall, which was originally titled, the title of this talk, New Directions in Asian Architecture. But I was told if you put tropical into it, it will sell. And I said, but my essay is critical of tropical architecture and the whole paradigm. And they said, no, put tropical in it. So I said, do I have a choice? I said, no. So we are cultural. We produce the books, we consume them. And Singapore, which produced the MIMA discourse, which published all those MIMA monographs, which produced the regional seminars and the publications, which published the journal MIMA, ended up producing, at least 50 vanity publications with the title Tropical. So this region is culpable in the transformation of architecture into an object of consumption. Baba's last effort is Kandalama. Very different to everything he has done before. You might almost say he is collaborating with Valentine on this one. It's a very modernist building. But you can see that Baba is not comfortable with using a modernist vocabulary. He wants to conceal the building in the foliage. So this is an interesting sort of final building for Baba, which of course is admired by everybody because it is a modernist green building from a kind of, superficial green way. But it's really a paradox. It's a paradox that you can't easily resolve. Now I'm going to close this lecture by again addressing some of the issues that we have failed to recognize. We have failed to recognize that cities are the most important urban habitats in Asia. Look at all the cities that we have. And then ask yourself how many architects have addressed the issue of urbanization and the poverty that is associated with it, and the displacement, and the informal settlements that are in many of these countries. And how many architects have been teaching the next generation in dealing with such topics. So that's the first question. Multi-story housing. Now this is the picture in many Asian cities. And have we designed good examples and good models for this, or are we just appropriating something that is happening elsewhere? Is it just about build fast, or is it about trying to understand what it means to be separated from the ground, to live in these congested and dehumanizing environments? Labor. And here Malaysia is particularly culpable. What happens when your entire working class is of a different race, from a different country? And what happens about the way you treat them, what the standards are, and what happens to them afterwards? And how long can this happen? What will happen when India no longer produces labor for the world? How are you going to fill that gap? This is an important question. Slums. Now, every city has slums. South Asia has, slums that are as bad as Dharavi. But you have your own compounds that sit side by side to your multi-story housing blocks. So how are you going to resolve the question of urban poverty and the types of environments that are produced? Because this is also kind of ecological challenge. How do you deliver the infrastructure that creates social equity? This is a problem for Sri Lanka, post-war refugee camps, the resettlement of the thousands of people who are displaced. But there have been wars all over Asia. Remember that Chandigarh was built for the refugees of partition. So this is a problem that we need to address. And the types of temporary housing or permanent housing that is built for these refugees is so under-researched, so poorly controlled, because architects are not engaging with them. Finally, waves of destruction. This is going to happen in different forms over and over again. And we need to rise to the occasion and come up with strategies for building, for reconstruction. So these are the common problems we have, all throughout Asia. And these are the things that we have been ignoring while we were busy producing something for nationalism and producing something for tourism. So what I'm asking you is to at least educate another generation into dealing with these problems, so that we're not just going to borrow the solutions that are available in the West, because they are not going to be suited to the new Asia that we're developing.